Dear students, welcome to BioDio. In today's class, we are going to discuss the second year topic. The first unit of the second year is reproduction. We are going to discuss some very important questions asked in the year 2020 from this unit. So actually from this unit, 8 questions were asked. So actually 4 chapters are there. First one, reproduction in organisms, then sexual reproduction in flowering plants, then human reproduction, then reproductive health. But from the first chapter, reproduction in organism, there were no questions. So 3 questions were from the second chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay. Out of the 8 questions from this unit, 3 were from the second chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. We can see one among them. Question number 1, the body of the ovule is fused within the funicle at nucellus, chalaza, hilum, micropyle. Here you can see this is the ovary. And the ovule is present inside the ovary. Okay. So here come the ovary. And inside the ovary, the ovule is present. So ovule is connected to the ovary wall by means of a stalk, and the stalk of the ovule is called a funicle. It is called a funicle. So here come the funicle. So the region of the funicle which touches the ovule, at this point there will be a scar, and that structure is called hilum. It is called hilum. So hilum is present at the junction between funicle and the ovule. At the opposite end of the funicle, at the other end of the funicle, you can see the placenta. Here come the placenta. Okay. So placenta is present in between the funicle and the ovary wall. Hilum is seen in between the funicle and the ovule. Okay. So the answer is hilum. Hilum is the right answer. Okay. Now we can see the second question from this chapter. The second question is a little bit tricky. In water hyacinth and water lily, pollination take place by. So since both of these plants are in aquatic medium, students may think that the pollination is by water, that is hydrophily. But actually they are seen above the level of the water, and the pollination take place either with the help of wind or with the help of insects. That is the correct answer. That means in the case of water hyacinth and water lily, we can see the wind pollination or anemophily or insect pollination or endomophily is present. So insects and wind is the right answer. Choice number 3. Okay. The water, in the first choice there will be water, the second choice water, and the fourth choice water is there. Water is not acting as a medium for the pollination in the case of water hyacinth and water lily. The next question. So 3 questions were there from this chapter. The third question. The plant parts which consists of 2 generations, one within the other. So in the first year, in the chapter Plant Kingdom, third chapter, you might have studied that there are 2 types of generations in the life history of a plant. One is called sporophytic generation, and the other one is called gametophytic generation. So the plant's life cycles have been classified into 3 depending upon the prominence of the sporophytic stage or gametophytic stage. Haplontic life cycle, haplodiplontic life cycle, diplontic life cycle. So in the case of flowering plants or angiosperms, the type of life cycle is diplontic. That means the sporophytic stages are more prominent than gametophytic stages. The adult plant body is represented by a sporophyte. So here you can see a sporophyte. A sporophyte is always diploid and it produces spore. The spore is always haploid. That stage of the plant that produces spore is called sporophyte. Spore generating stage is called sporophyte. So sporophytes are diploid, but the spores are haploid. The haploid stages are representing the gametophytic generation. The gametophyte is haploid and the gametes are also haploid. Okay. So gametophyte is haploid and that produces gamete. Gamete also is haploid. So the sporophyte is the diploid stage. Spore, gametophyte and gamete are the haploid stages. So these three are parts of gametophytic generation. So here two generations, that means one sporophytic generation and one gametophytic generation is needed. The pollen grain inside the anther. Pollen grain is the fully developed microspore. That means the pollen grain is haploid. But the anther inside which the pollen grains are produced, the anther is diploid. That means anther is a part of the flower, no? The functional part of the stamen is called anther. So anther is diploid. Diploid means it is a part of the sporophytic generation. And the pollen grain produced from that, the pollen grain is haploid. It is a fully developed microspore or microgametophyte. The pollen grain is the microgametophyte, so it will be haploid. So haploid is one generation and diploid is another generation. So inside the anther you can see pollen grain. Inside the sporophytic generation you can see the gametophytic generation. So A is the answer. The germinated pollen grain with the two male gametes. The pollen grain, as you know, it is also haploid. The male gametes are also haploid. So all these are parts of gametophytic generation. The seed inside the fruit. The seed is diploid and the fruit also is diploid. Both are diploid. So they are parts of sporophytic generation. The end products of sexual reproduction in angiosperms are considered to be seeds and fruits. Then embryo sac. Embryo sac is the female gametophyte or the fully developed megaspore. So it is actually haploid. Embryo sac is haploid. Haploid means it is a part of gametophytic generation. And the embryo sac is present inside the megasporangium called ovule. So ovule is a part of a sporophytic stage. It is a diploid. So ovule is sporophyte. Then inside the sporophyte, the female gametophyte, embryo sac is present. Then anther is the sporophyte inside which the microgametophyte or pollen grains are present. So A is right, D also is right. So the answer must be A and D, the second option. Okay. So these three were questions from the second chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Now we can move on to the third chapter. The third chapter is human reproduction. From this human reproduction also, three questions were asked in 2020. So the first question, the meiotic division of the secondary oocyte is completed. The meiotic division of the secondary oocyte is completed. Actually, the secondary oocyte is considered to be the stage at which the fertilization takes place. Okay. During ovulation also, the Graafian follicle is bursting so as to release the secondary oocyte. So ovum means the secondary oocyte. So the meiotic division of the secondary oocyte is completed when the sperm fuses with the ovum. That is at the time of fertilization. So that is the correct answer. The polar bodies are produced by during fertilization. So when the secondary oocyte is divided by meiosis, the secondary polar bodies are produced, right? The primary oocyte, you can see the primary oocyte. The primary oocyte is diploid. That divides by first stage of meiosis producing a primary polar body and a secondary oocyte. The secondary oocyte is haploid. Okay, the secondary oocyte is haploid. Then the secondary oocyte undergo the second stage of meiosis producing the secondary polar body and what is called ootid. So at this point, what is called fertilization take place. So fertilization take place in the secondary oocyte, and at the time of fertilization, the meiotic division will be completed. Okay, so second choice is the correct answer. Now the second question from the human reproduction. The second question is regarding the hormonal control. Which of the following hormone levels will cause a release of ovum, that is ovulation, from the Graafian follicle? You see, when the Graafian follicle is bursting, suppose this is a Graafian follicle, the fully mature follicle is called Graafian follicle, and inside the Graafian follicle you can see the fully developed ovum, and a fluid filled space called antrum also is there. So at the 14th day of a menstrual cycle, what happens? The Graafian follicle is bursting. The Graafian follicle is bursting. When the Graafian follicle bursts and releases the ovum. So for the bursting of Graafian follicle and the release of ovum, the LH must be in the highest level. You see, you had studied a term called LH surge, isn't it? The LH must be at the highest peak. The FSH must be at the high, so LH must be increased, FSH must also be increased at the time of ovulation. So the low concentration of LH and low concentration of FSH are wrong. Then regarding the progesterone is secreted from corpus luteum, no? The corpus luteum will be produced from the vacant Graafian follicle only after ovulation. The vacant Graafian follicle present inside the ovary will become converted into the endocrine structure called corpus luteum. So the progesterone will be there only after ovulation. That means only after the 14th day. So that is also wrong. But what is needed? The high concentration of estrogen. The high concentration of estrogen is needed. That means at the time of ovulation, LH must be at the highest level, FSH must be at the highest level, estrogen must be in the high concentration. Okay, so among these four choices, the high concentration of estrogen is the most appropriate one. The last question from human reproduction is a matching type of question. All matching type of questions are actually easier one. The placenta, zona pellucida, bulbourethral glands, Leydig cells. The second column, androgen, HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, layer of the ovum, lubrication of the penis. You can see human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, a very important hormone that is produced from placenta, isn't it? The placenta produces HCG. So A2. So A2, only one choice, so automatically the 2 become the correct answer, isn't it? Placenta, one of the main hormones secreted by the placenta is human chorionic gonadotropin or HCG. Then we can see the other choices also. Zona pellucida. Zona pellucida is the covering of the ovum, right? Is the covering of the ovum, that means B3. Then bulbourethral glands, the secretions of the bulbourethral glands are used for the lubrication of the penis. It is accessory reproductive gland in males. The Leydig cells are interstitial cells, isn't it? Leydig cells are otherwise called interstitial cells, and they are producing the masculine hormone, namely androgen. So D1. So the second option is the correct one. So 3 questions from sexual reproduction flowering plants and 3 questions from human reproduction. Totally 8 questions were there. Then the remaining 2 questions were from reproductive health. Okay. So from reproductive health, only 2 questions were there. The first one, in which of the following techniques the embryos are transferred to assist those females who cannot conceive? Actually concerned with the embryo transfer, isn't it? So there are 2 methods of embryo transfer. One is called zygote intrafallopian transfer or Swift, then intrauterine transfer or IUT. These are the only 2 methods of ET. ET means embryo transfer. What is the difference between Swift and IUT? In Swift, you can see that the embryo before 8 blastomere stage, isn't it? The embryo undergo a process of cleavage, producing a 2 blastomere stage, then a 4 blastomere stage, then 8 blastomere stage, like this. Isn't it? This is zygote, 2 blastomere stage, 4 blastomere stage, 8 blastomere stage, then it becomes the 16 blastomere stage called morula, then it becomes the 32 blastomere stage called blastocyst. Isn't it? This is the blastocyst, this is the morula. These are the blastomere aggregations produced by cleavage. So here you can see that in the fallopian tube, inside the isthmus of the fallopian tube, the ampullary isthmic junction is the area where fertilization takes place. Suppose this is the ampullary isthmic junction. So this is the isthmus and this is the uterus. Okay. So if the embryo more than 8 blastomeres is to be transferred, it must be transported inside the uterus. That is called intrauterine transfer. If an embryo below 8 blastomere stage is transferred, it is not to be transferred inside the uterus, but to be transferred inside the isthmus or a fallopian tube. That is called zygote intrafallopian transfer. Okay. So before 8 blastomere, it is transferred inside the fallopian tube or isthmus portion. After 8 blastomere stage, that is 16 or 32 cell stage, it is transported inside the uterus. So Swift and Iud, zygote intrafallopian transfer and intrauterine transfer are the two methods of embryo transfer. So the answer is 3, Swift and Iud. Okay. ICSI means intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So ICSI is inside the ovum, the sperm is artificially injected. That is not embryo transfer. Then GIFT is gamete intrafallopian transfer. The ovum is transferred inside it. That is not embryo transfer technology. Here it is said that embryos are transferred. The GIFT is gamete intrafallopian transfer. So GIFT cannot be the answer. So the right answer is Swift and Iud. Okay. Now the second question. The second question from reproductive health is an easy question. Select the option including all sexually transmitted diseases. So you can see malaria, an option is there. Malaria is not at all sexually transmitted. So we can easily delete the first option. Malaria is not sexually transmitted. We studied the life cycle of a malarial parasite. Okay. It is transmitted by female Anopheles mosquito. Then in the fourth option also malaria is there. So we can eliminate that also. Clear? Then in the second option you can see cancer. Cancer is not a sexually transmitted disease, no? Right? So the second also can be eliminated. So it's an easy question. The answer is what? Gonorrhea, syphilis, genital herpes. All these are STD. STD means sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, thank you.